Kohisado, the CEO of Toyota, paused mid-sentence as the overhead lights dimmed. The sleek form of the Aquat engine was now illuminated like some mythic artifact. It hummed quietly in the contained silence of the demonstration hall, seemingly powered by nothing more than a simple bucket of ordinary tap water. He didn't need to elaborate, the implication was clear. In that charged moment, an unspoken declaration hung in the air. This innovation could very well upend everything the EV industry stood for. Across Japan and then around the world, the ripples were instantaneous. Observers struggled to reconcile the familiar image of Toyota, quiet, methodical, almost conservative, with this electrifying revelation, an onboard electrolytic reactor that separated hydrogen from water in real time, feeding a compact fuel cell and delivering power with no fossil fuels, no grid, and no lithium. Just water. A closed-loop hydrogen system, clean and almost poetic in its simplicity. The engine consumed tap or rainwater, refilled in a couple of minutes and promised over 900 kilometers of range. The future didn't come draped in wires and batteries, it came in the elemental purity of a water molecule. Immediately, questions swarmed. How could Toyota have achieved something so revolutionary so quietly? Sagecraft was subtle yet powerful. He didn't scream that this was the end of electric vehicles, he let his creation speak for itself. The audience already understood. Refueling in 2 minutes with water alone dismantled years of infrastructure investments in charging networks, battery supply chains, lithium mining, and grid expansion. It was too elegant, too radical to ignore. Journalists scrambled for clarity. Was this a fuel cell? No. There was no high-pressure hydrogen tank, no external hydrogen station. The hydrogen was born inside the engine on demand. The only byproduct was water vapor. That meant zero emissions, zero reliance on battery materials, and no requirement for rare earth elements. It was molecular fuel, pure and simple. In the marquee quarters of the EV industry, the shock was seismic. Battery giants, once reveling in headlines about market dominance, now found themselves confronting a new paradigm. Lithium futures dipped, stock charts wavered. Tesla, BYD, and Rivian all tentatively retreated into boardrooms, reassessing strategies. Traders whispered about stranded assets. Planners looked at charging infrastructure with fresh trepidation. At the same time, environmental groups erupted in applause. Here was a technology that offered a credible path toward decarbonization without further exploiting fragile ecosystems or inciting geopolitical tension over mineral mining. The possibility of mobility powered by water, a form and function fused with environmental ethics, had an almost mythic allure. Governments, initially cautious, now pivoted. Regulators scrambled to define safety frameworks. Was a sealed reactor that split water on board truly safe across temperatures, altitudes, and traffic conditions? What about use in cold climates where water freezes? Toyota's certifications, including Japan's top environmental and road safety clearances, assuaged many fears, but not all. Lobbyists raised alarms. If water-powered engines proliferated, what would happen to economies built on lithium, oil, or even electricity grids? Would desalination plants be repurposed? Would rainwater harvesting become a new focus? At first, governments were pretty cautious, but now, they've really started to pivot. Regulators scrambled to figure out how to define safety frameworks for this new kind of technology. I mean, was a sealed reactor that split water on board truly safe, across all sorts of temperatures, altitudes, and traffic conditions? And what about using it in cold climates where water just freezes up? Toyota's certifications, including Japan's top environmental and road safety clearances, did a lot to calm people's fears, but not everyone was convinced. Lobbyists, in particular, started raising alarms. If water-powered engines became widespread, what would actually happen to economies that depend on lithium, oil, or even the electricity grids? Would desalination plants get a new purpose? And maybe rainwater harvesting would suddenly become a major focus? Meanwhile, Toyota just kept moving forward, and honestly they did it with a lot of stealth and confidence. The Aquat engines were already rolling off the production lines at the Higashi Fuji plant. Their plans called for the first vehicles, starting with the MyAQ, to hit the roads as early as the first quarter of 2026. But their ambitions definitely didn't stop there. Commercial trucks and Lexus models were already in the pipeline. Thanks to exclusive patents on the electrolytic reactor, competitors really couldn't just copy the technology. The social implications were, well, just as significant. In developing regions where getting fuel is either tough or just way too expensive, having a vehicle that could run on collected rainwater or even locally sourced non-potable supplies could be a total game-changer for mobility. Farmers, traders, and rural healthcare providers could travel farther and more often, without the economic strain of conventional fuel costs. So, in a way, mobility itself could become more equitable, no longer tied to where the fuel supply chains are located. As engineers demonstrated the ease of operation to small groups in the hall, it became clear that user interaction had been a design priority. A single dashboard indicator displayed water levels, projected range, and hydrogen production rate in an intuitive format. There were no complex controls for the driver to manage. The system's AI handled everything from flow rates to temperature balancing. The driver's only task was to ensure the reservoir was topped up, a task so straightforward it required no special training. For Toyota, the unveiling was also a subtle statement of independence from dominant industry trends. While other automakers were betting heavily on solid-state batteries or extended-range EVs, Toyota had stepped sideways into a space with little direct competition. This move insulated the company from some of the fiercest battles over battery supply contracts and charging infrastructure partnerships. It also positioned them as a supplier of not just vehicles, but of an entirely new propulsion ecosystem that others might license in the future. The demonstration concluded not with a roaring finale, but with a quiet, profound shift in perspective. The hum of the Aquat engine faded, yet its silent promise seemed to grow louder in the minds of everyone present. Conversations that began in hushed, incredulous tones soon evolved into fervent discussions on logistics, scalability, and global impact. The question was no longer if this would change the world, but how and how quickly. So the demonstration concluded not with a roaring finale, but with this quiet, profound shift in perspective. The hum of the Aquat engine faded away, yet honestly its silent promise seemed to grow even louder in the minds of everyone present. Conversations that had started in these hushed, almost incredulous tones soon evolved into, fervent discussions on logistics, scalability, and global impact. The question was no longer if this would change the world, but how, and how quickly. For the automotive giants, the initial shock, well, it gave way to a frantic behind-the-scenes scramble. Legal and engineering departments were suddenly tasked with a near-impossible mission: to dissect the few public details of Toyota's patents for any potential workaround. Whispers of corporate espionage were, of course, vehemently denied, but the industry's pulse raced with this new kind of anxiety. The race was no longer about who could build the best battery, but who could decode the secret of water or develop a viable alternative hydrogen-on-demand system. Alliances, once solidified around lithium mines and gigafactories, suddenly seemed, fragile and up for renegotiation. Meanwhile, the financial markets began to, tell a new story. The dip in lithium futures solidified into a sustained plunge. Mining conglomerates saw billions in market valuation just evaporate overnight. Conversely, companies specializing in electrolysis technology, water purification, and composite materials for lightweight tubing saw their stocks surge as investors desperately sought to back the next big thing. Venture capital, which had flowed relentlessly into EV startups, abruptly pivoted, searching for the next Aquat. A new ecosystem of supporting industries was honestly being born in real time on trading floors around the globe. The court of public opinion became a pivotal battleground. Social media was inundated with reactions ranging from unbridled techno-optimism to deep-seated skepticism. Enthusiasts hailed the Aquat as the salvation the planet needed, a miracle machine that could end the resource wars before they began. Detractors, however, raised pointed questions. They questioned the energy efficiency of the entire process, arguing that the electricity required to split water must come from somewhere, potentially just shifting emissions from the tailpipe to the power plant. Others voiced concerns about the potential monopolization of water resources, asking if a future of water barons could replace that of oil magnates. So, Toyota, anticipating this scrutiny, began a meticulous campaign of transparency. They released white papers detailing the engine's energy balance, emphasizing that, it was designed to be most efficient when paired with renewable energy sources, creating a truly clean cycle. They also announced partnerships with global NGOs to develop guidelines for equitable water access, positioning themselves not as owners of the resource, but as its stewards. On the geopolitical stage, the calculus of power began to shift. Nations rich in lithium and cobalt watched their strategic leverage diminish, while countries with advanced technological infrastructure and stable water sources found themselves in a newly advantageous position. Traditional petrostates, once thought to be facing obsolescence, began exploring a new narrative, repurposing their vast wealth and expertise in fuel logistics and distribution to build a new blue hydrogen economy. potentially positioning themselves as hubs for the future of water-based fuel. Back in the quiet halls of Toyota's headquarters, the mood was not one of celebration, but of intense focus. The unveiling was not the finish line, it was the starting gun. The real work had just begun: mass production, ensuring rigorous safety and durability standards, building a new refueling infrastructure, and navigating the complex web of international regulations. They had not just introduced a new engine, they had thrown a stone into the pond of global industry, and now they had to navigate the waves they had created. The world was watching, waiting, and already changing in the wake of their quiet revelation. The room's atmosphere during those final hours was one of measured excitement. This was not the frenzied hype often associated with tech reveals. It was the quiet acknowledgement of witnessing a step change in what was thought possible. Industry veterans, normally skeptical of grand claims, found themselves discussing practical deployment timelines rather than feasibility. Startups whispered about pivoting to support services, from water logistics to aftermarket upgrades. Policymakers in attendance considered how existing fuel taxation models might adapt when water became a primary transport